Okay, let's begin. I am Lanice Antoine Shelley, and I'll be your host through constructive, healing-based conversations designed to illuminate the adoptee, parents, and the adoption curious. We center the topics around community, mentorship, leadership, and healing, so you get a multi-dimensional view that is ultimately empowering. These are the voices who could not speak when they were young. Hey y'all, if you've seen me on Instagram, I'm in my summer glow phase and I am unapologetic about it. My hair is luscious. Fun fact, I didn't start properly treating and doing my own hair until I was a grown adult because like many Black adoptees, no one showed me how to do my own hair. And because I love you all so much, I'm going to share with you my hair secret. I'm always on the lookout for things you'd love and things that will enhance your well-being inside and out. We Unique Cosmetics sent me their Moisture Lock pomade and scalp and hair therapy oil from their Metamorphosis line, and it's so decadent, light, and nourishing, fam. This has become a hair routine staple. It has a soft lemongrass scent that people comment on when I walk by or when they're doing my hair because now I have boho locks. They also sent me a 15% discount link for you to try their products and hair tutorial service. And Unique Cosmetics is Black owned and operated by a mother and daughter duo dedicated to helping the adoptee community. Check out the link in the show notes. And this is for all ages, fam. So tell your friends. So come on, embark on a hair-loving journey with We Unique World. From interactive workshops to premium products, they're all about empowering you to embrace your unique hair journey. Because remember, all hair is good hair, especially when it's healthy. Hola fam, bonjour, drasvidanya, privet. How is your heart? I rode my bike Electra to a rigorous yoga class this morning. The sun was out in Chicago. It was beautifully restorative to get out, to be on Lakeshore Path. So I'm feeling good. Here's a question for you. Are there things that you cannot do or talk about, either to shield a hidden shame or to not make other people feel uncomfortable? There are a few things that I won't talk about, but something that I've learned this week is how hard it is for me to talk about money. I've started working with a financial advisor, and I literally got heart palpitations when he asked me about my student loan debt. Oh my gosh, it was so hard to say out loud the amount because I have my master's and I've studied all over the world and it's just accumulated and all of those things. So I have deep anxiety around that debt. I had never said it out loud to a stranger before. However, as soon as I said it, a great weight was lifted and I got excited because I knew it was the beginning of a deep healing. It is said that there is a correlation between money mindset and love mindset. They come from the same well. So, in healing my financial situation, I will be healing my relationships as well. Oh, mind blown. A topic that is taboo and notoriously secretive is adoption. People are more open now, but a few years back it was something that was not socially talked about or accepted. I love that there are more and more adoptees stepping out and courageously telling their stories. They aren't waiting for external permission. They are following the intuitive pull towards sharing something sacred and ultimately freeing. My guest today is Edward Gangi, who wrote The Gift Best Given, a memoir. He talks about his search for his biological mother and how he came to the understanding of what a mother who relinquishes a child goes through. No matter who you are or where you stand in your journey, every story deserves to be told and validated. Ed is a perfect example of someone who has learned how to alchemize his story. Okay, let's get to it. Well, we have so much to talk about. I am very much intrigued by your book, Edward.
Well, it's an interesting story.
Yeah. Well, let's dive into it. How did you go about writing it? What prompted you to write it?
I think it was idle curiosity. As the book talks about, I waited until I was approaching my 70th birthday. And I had always, for a long time, I had known I was adopted, but never did anything to pursue any of those answers. I'd have the occasional thought of, gee, I wonder who would give up a wonderful kid like me. Mm-hmm. And, then I just sort of put it away again. And we were up in New Jersey, and this was in 2017. And my wife's father had recently passed away, and we were up there to inter his remains. And coincidentally, my adoptive mother's family was buried in a nearby cemetery, and we went over there to visit. And I was standing in front of my mother's parents' tombstone, and I just all of a sudden got the itch and said, well, it'd be interesting to know more about these people, now this being the adoptive family. And I had read a book recently. I was in the midst of rereading it called The Lost, which was written by a very good journalist by the name of Daniel Mendelsohn. And it was his search for his relatives who had perished during the Holocaust. And it was not a Holocaust book. It was just he was looking for what became of 6 people. And it was just a fascinating book in terms of the story and his methodology. And I was thinking, okay, I could do this on a micro level. I can't go to Ukraine. I can't go to Australia tracking down relatives, but I can certainly do some of this. And when we got back, I went to our local library. I had, obviously had my grandparents' names and started going through Ancestry, and was startled with how easily information could be available. And I sat there for a brief moment and I said, if it's this easy, then I can probably start looking into this mystery of my adoption. And it was a mystery because it had never been discussed with me. I accidentally found out when I was going through some papers of my parents, and I found kind of an interesting legal-looking document. Mm-hmm. It had their signatures. It had an attorney's signature. It had the signature of a woman whose name I didn't recognize. And what I discovered later was that was my adoption decree. And my adoption took place as a privately arranged adoption. So it didn't go through the courts, or it did go through the courts, but not through social service agencies. And the benefit that it provided was, it put that paperwork in my parents' hands to retain, and it gave me a name to start with. So I went back to the library, signed into Ancestry, typed in that name, and that's where the story truly began.
Wow. And can you say the name of that book again?
Sure. The name of the book is The Gift Best Given, a memoir. Okay. And it tells about my search, the process that and the journey that I went on. Mm-hmm. And it tells the story of the woman who was my biological mother from the time that she left home. I discovered in 1942 as a 17-year-old. She traveled from New York to Vancouver, British Columbia, alone by train to join an ice skating troupe. And that had always been her ambition, was to be a professional ice skater. And some 5 years later, she returned unexpectedly pregnant and kept her pregnancy a secret from everybody in her family, save for her oldest sister and her sister's husband.
Wow. And did you ever get the opportunity to discuss this with your adoptive mother?
I never did. As I said, I started this journey in 2017. I learned later that my biological mother had died in 2014. As far as my adoptive parents, as I said, there was never discussion. I remember one kind of clumsy statement my mother made along the line. This is when I was a small child, saying, somebody may tell you you don't belong to us, but don't listen, you're ours. And that's the only recollection I have of any discussion along that line. And, so I went through life with the thought that if my parents were not talking about it, then I wouldn't question it.
Wow. Okay.
And I had a delightful life. I had a wonderful life as a child. And I always felt they could not have loved me any more than they could have loved, or any less than they loved a natural born child to them.
Absolutely. That's how I feel about my mother.
Right. And I heard that I heard that with your mom and your godmother. You could hear the love.
Thank you. I know you grew up in a time when adoption was less spoken about. It was a little bit more taboo. So how was that for you in the realization, the revelation of your adoption, having been brought up with this idea of the hush-hush nature of it?
Yeah, I think I gained a pretty good understanding of it, and I've done lots of reading since. And that whole baby scoop era was one that was very, sort of lived in the shadows. There were parents who wanted families and couldn't create them. And there was an onus on them, when everybody else around them was building these big post-World War II perfect families. And there was certainly an onus placed on a woman who came home unexpectedly pregnant and without a partner. So, I understand the difficulties on both sides there, and that the solution at the time was, well, we won't talk about this. And, we'll keep it in the shadows. And even adoptive parents sometimes went off and sequestered themselves until they could come back and say, surprise, we had a baby, and pass them off as natural born children. So, I'm sorry.
No worries. In the writing of this, how was it for you? Was it cathartic? Was there a sense of healing and closure when you were done with it? Or did it just create more questions for you?
I think I answered pretty much all the questions that were out there. I answered questions I didn't know I had. But, and as I said, I never gave frequent thought to who my birth parents were, just because I felt I had a very good life. So I never felt like I had these gnawing questions that I needed to address. But I think we all have a curiosity about where we come from, both in terms of people and place. And now I've answered lots of people questions. I'd like to spend more time with place. But as I wrote the book, there was certainly I think a catharsis there, or an understanding of what the situation was that resulted in my being adopted, and an understanding that it was something that was done for my benefit. And, and I think in the end, it benefited me. It certainly benefited my adoptive parents who very badly wanted a child. And, and it also gave me a sense of empathy for what my birth mother must have gone through at the time. And I believe probably every day of her life, there's giving up a child is not an event. It's, it's something that impacts your life. It's not a one-day thing.
And I learned that just this past year. I said in one of my episodes that my biological brother told me that my biological mother thinks of me every day. And it was just something that I could still, it's hard for me to fathom, and people forget that there are so many people impacted by adoption, and that the people relinquishing the child are impacted indelibly because of this event.
I agree with you 100% on that. I don't think there's any doubt. And I have no way of knowing, but my understanding from cousins who I had reunion with, when I said, "What did you know about me?" They shrugged their shoulders and they said, "We knew nothing." Mm-hmm. And this is the kind of family that if anyone knew anything, we all would have known about it. So I was a secret. I was a secret, and I remained a secret. My birth mother ultimately married about 7 years after I was born. And, and I've met my maternal half brother, and he was shocked. And my feeling is she probably never even discussed it with the man she married. This was a secret that she carried, and a burden that she carried.
Did you share your book with your cousins?
I did. I shared with everybody, and I think that was a little bit of an act of courage, because you write the book, you publish the book, and then you send it out to people, and you sit there, sort of gritting your teeth, saying, "I hope they don't call and say you got this all wrong." And for the most part, they called and they said, "You got it all right." You told the story as accurately as we think it must have occurred.
I would qualify that as a huge act of courage. Just writing your story and putting it out there into the public eye, into the hands of your family as well, is huge. And a lot of people struggle just even having a simple conversation about adoption. And here you are, just opening up your story. So
this was a little bit of a radical departure. I had, through my life, as my parents didn't discuss it, so I did not. But once this had all was in progress, I went to my eldest cousin, who has recently passed away, but she was the one who was closest to my adoptive parents. And I said, "Okay, let me take a chance." And I said, "What can you tell me about my adoption?" And I thought that would just knock her off her chair, because, again, it was not something that we had talked about. And she very matter-of-factly said, "I don't know a lot." She said, "But what I can tell you is when your parents went to bring you home from the hospital, my mother went with them, and your mother was an ice skater." And that was about it. But it was very, very matter of fact, in that she was not at all surprised that I was asking about it. And later, when I sent my copies of my book to my cousins, who I had always known as my adoptive cousins, 2 or 3 of them got back to me and said, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. We always assumed you knew. We could have told you." So this was something that was talked about elsewhere, and I was the one who was in the dark.
What were some other revelations that you found in the mining, the excavation of your story?
I think the biggest revelation, and I don't know, revelation is really the best word, is just how kind and how generous some people can be. When I started digging, I found some people who turned into real search angels in the process, not the search angels that we know from the genealogical perspective, but people who had been acquaintances and had knowledge, and who were so happy to have been contacted and so happy to share what little bit they could, about my birth mother. And that was a reflection of her. The feedback I got from all of these people was, that she was a wonderful person. She was kind. She was considerate. She always remained in touch years after they had parted ways. And they could not have been happier to talk about her. Not one of them knew about me, though. So, that was a big piece. I think the other piece that was the revelation is just the finally coming to the understanding of what a mother who relinquishes a child must go through. Yeah. And what that process must be like. And it's again, I don't know that it's a process, because I think a process comes to an end. And I don't think there was an end there.
I think that's exactly right. There isn't an end. It's a constant reminder each day of something huge that you relinquished, that you surrendered to somebody else's care. I don't think anyone ever finds closure from that. So, in writing your book, were there any takeaways that you wanted for adoptees specifically? Hey, I want to share with you something that has changed my life. It's more like someone, my therapist. Why is she so important? Well, because I want to win in this life. I want to break through the carousel of stories I've compiled that hold me back, that keep me from expanding into my full potentiality. Stories of unworthiness, not enoughness, and even stories of questioning why I am here. I also want to stop dumping my unsorted feelings on the people around me and reacting with the same behavioral patterns that keep me stuck. Conversations with my therapist have made me more confident, clearer in my intention, and more centered in my spirit. That is why I am elated that we are sponsored by BetterHelp, where you can, from wherever you happen to be right now, match with a therapist tailored to your exact needs. With BetterHelp, you can tap into a network of over 30,000 licensed and experienced therapists who can help you with a wide range of issues. Someone who you can text at any time and schedule online for either a chat, Zoom, or phone call. And if it turns out that your therapist isn't the right fit, you can switch to a new therapist at no additional cost. Visit the link in the show notes, betterhelp.com, when they were young, to get 10% off the first month. You need to click the link in the show notes in order to get the 10% discount. I want to see you win, beloved. Let's do it together. Visit the link, betterhelp.com, when they were young.
I think, there are a number of, I think, aspects of the quote unquote adoption community.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, the biggest piece is, I think, taking a step back, taking a deep breath, and trying to understand everybody's situation at the time that an adoption occurred.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people are probably rightfully hurt by having been relinquished. And when I say hurt emotionally, dealing with the fact that somebody would give them up. But, surrounding every one of those people is a story. People, I think, don't just give birth to children, for the sake of giving them away, and if for the most part, there's some reason they needed to make that sacrifice. So I think, be patient with your consideration of why the adoption occurred. I think be kind to yourself. I think a lot of people judge themselves as unworthy because they were adopted.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't believe that's true. I think, nobody can give that or take it away from you. It's something you need to do for yourself. So, see your own value in this process, whether and that's an easy thing to say. Mm-hmm. It's an easy thing to say, but I think once a day you have to say, I am a valuable person. And, and some of us have dealt much better with that than others have. And some of us have been much more fortunate with our, who we wound up with as parents raising us than others. But don't sell yourself short. I think that's an important piece. And I think if you have questions, pursue them. I waited a very long time, and I really have no regrets. But if there's one, it would be that I didn't ask questions earlier of people who might have been able to tell me more.
Yeah, I love that. Finding value in yourself first. And that's huge, right? and reminding yourself of that, because you're right in saying that a lot of adoptees, and even myself at times, have felt like my value has been diminished because of my adoption, because of abandonment, or whatever story you have around being relinquished. And it's imperative to start from yourself and know that you have a purpose and a value, um, and and just there is a deeper need for your existence that you may not understand, but it is being played out, and it is being played out exactly when and how it should be.
I agree with that. It's interesting. It's not a particularly unique phrase, but I've always said everything happens for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And I was talking to my maternal half brother one day, and I said that, and he said, "What did you say?" I said, no matter what it is, everything happens for a reason. He said, my mother used to say that all the time. And, we all have a purpose, and, we may not recognize it, and even if we have nobody else, we've got ourselves, and we can't afford to chip away at ourselves.
Yeah. Well, where can people find you and read your book and connect with what it is that you're doing?
Well, they can find me on my website at www.digangiauthor.com, and that's DIGAN like Nancy, GI author.com. I'm on both Facebook and Instagram, again at Gangi Author. And the book is available through any bookstore. It's available on Amazon or any online retailer. And the book is also available from my website, and you can pay by credit card, and I'd be happy to personalize and autograph copies. It's available both as a soft cover and an ebook. Of course, I'm afraid I can't autograph the ebooks, but if an order comes in today, it goes out in the mail tomorrow, if not today. And I think it's a story that resonates with a lot of people. It's a happy story, right? I think I don't feel like I was damaged by adoption. I had a wonderful family. When I excuse me, when I finally found my my remaining family and found my mother's story, they were stories I was perfectly comfortable with. And, and I came to a great understanding about my mother. I had always assumed that she was a high school girl who stayed out too late and came home with a problem. And as it turned out, she was a professional woman whose career was on the ascent, and she came home with a problem. But, but she made a very, very calculated, well-chosen decision. And, I think gave me a gift, gave my parents a gift, and continued on and had a very, very productive life of her own. She did not let this stop her.
Well, as I said before, I think that it was very courageous of you to write your story. But in this moment right now, where in your life do you think you can apply courage that will inspire others?
I think my courage is best used in continuing to tell my story to anyone who might have interest, whether or not they like the outcome of the story or not. I think, Amy Geller, when you had her on, I think talked about we need to surround ourselves with love in this community. But, you can go and find a lot of folks online who are not loving. They have the same situation. They too were relinquished, and we all have different details in their lives, but they don't want to hear about a happy ending. Because theirs has not been a happy ending. And my feeling is I'll go out, and whether the story is the one you want to hear or not, I'll tell it, and then if you're going to snap back at me that, that I'm in the fog or I believe in balloons and unicorns, so be it. But, it's my story, and I'll own it and I'll tell it.
Well, I always say that we are the experts of our own stories, and all of the stories, all of the interpretations are valid. And it's important not to compare our traumas, not to compare our stories at all, because we have, even within families, like my sister and I have a vastly different approach to adoption. And it's her story and interpretation is valid, and so is mine.
Sure it is.
And just allowing each person to live out and interpret the way that they deem fit.
Yeah, I think that's very accurate. And I think it's very interesting that, there's a community of adoptees out there or people somewhere in that adoption triad who most people are not even aware of. A couple of weeks back, I was doing a book signing at a local Friday night art walk here in our town. Mm-hmm. And in the process, I found out that the lady sitting next to me signing her books had relinquished a child as a teenager. We were sitting in front of a local bookstore, and the lady who runs the bookstore came out and said, I'm adopted too, don't you? Mm-hmm. And no, I didn't. And in the process, two other people who were total strangers came up, one saying, I adopted a child from Korea several years ago. And another woman came up and said, I adopted 3 children. So, these are people, these are everyday people, and they're all part of our stories. And they're just, it's everyday life to them.
It is. That was great. That was wonderful. I so appreciate this conversation, Edward, and your time that you've taken to speak with me and share your story. I'll definitely look into purchasing your book.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you. It's, again, you've had some folks on, and you can hear the love. You can hear it's imperfect, but it's love. And life is a messy thing. But, there's no reason that a messy life can't have lots of love in it.
Another beautiful episode. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to my guest today. If you liked this episode, the best way to support me and this work is to write an iTunes review, a 5-star review. This helps us reach the top of searches and helps more people to find us. And if you personally want to connect, please reach out on Instagram or Facebook. And I have some great resource material on my website at laniceantoineshelley.com. So go on over there too. Until next we meet, go gently and have courage, my love.